Welcome back. All right, so I want to talk about Stanley Cup Finals today because why not? This was something I was taking magnets off the board, then I started putting magnets up, and I was like, I wonder if I can remember all the Stanley Cup Finals and who won from 1981 through till now. And of course, that's when I started watching hockey, and I did remember, but it took a while. So, and if anybody's get all curious, yes, I brought my wife in and said, so I did this. I didn't look anything up, and she just said I was ridiculous and walked out. So, ridiculous means awesome. So from 1981 and through until now, you can see I came in during the Islanders dynasty here. But there's certain finals that stand out to me and were favorites of mine, and there are certain ones that I may not have enjoyed as much. So there's 41 Stanley Cup finals on here, including who won and in how many games. And I want to use this marker here and rank them a little bit here, and we'll start at first. So my favorite Stanley Cup final that I've watched is '94. Game 7 between the Rangers and Vancouver was heartbreaking, but it was a great Stanley Cup final. Still think that was the best. And I think part of it was that it was 3 games to 1 for the Rangers. It looked like the Rangers were going to take them out in 5, which was fine. I mean, Vancouver, it was an unexpected run. It had been a lot of fun. And so game 5 was like, all right, if this is it, I'm okay with that. And they won. They won, and it was a great game. And then game 6, they won. And that game was never really in doubt. And then game 7, they let us down. But hey, it was an absolutely great Stanley Cup. So that's why I'm wearing Rangers, because I knew that one was going to be number 1. Now, if I got to go with the number 2 of my favorite Stanley Cup final that I've watched, I'm going to go with 1984. So, usually there's a recency bias when it comes to Stanley Cups and all that. For this video, odds are my favorite Stanley Cups are going to be the ones that are furthest back, some of my first memories. And that first Stanley Cup win for Wayne Gretzky, that was great to watch. And I was a big fan of the Oilers because I really liked the high flying 8-5, 8-6 games. For me as a kid, I thought that was absolutely great. So I'm going to go with that Oilers over the New York Islanders 4-1 series as my second favorite. Third favorite, I kind of want to go with one that's more recent, but I'm going to go with 1989. Now, what's interesting with 1989 is I couldn't stand the Flames after they knocked off the after they knocked off Vancouver in the first round that year. But I had to admit that Stanley Cup final was absolutely fantastic. The Flames and the Montreal Canadiens, it was such a good series. It ended up going 6 games. I kind of wish it had gone 7, but it was fantastic. It was such a good series, and Calgary won the Stanley Cup in Montreal, which isn't usually done. It's not usually a road team winning in Montreal to win a Stanley Cup. So, yeah, I'll go with that one at number 3. At number 4, and you would expect like Boston, Vancouver, or Dallas, Buffalo, because I'm a fan of Boston and Dallas, would be in there, but I wouldn't have them that high. So for number 4, yeah, I'll go with Tampa Bay Calgary. That was a 7 game series, and it was unpredictable. And I know for Calgary fans that's a tough memory, but for me, just watching it as just somebody that just wanted to watch good hockey, that was a fun series. It was, and it went the full 7 games, which definitely helps with Stanley Cup Finals and makes them somewhat more entertaining. Although you noticed I'm already not necessarily giving top grades to the ones that are your 7 game series. They might be a little bit more lopsided than that. Number 5, I'm going with Chicago in 2015 over Tampa Bay. That was a 6 game series that was so entertaining, and it was such a good Stanley Cup final. It was just great. And it was a series that I regret didn't go 7 games just because I wanted more of it. I wanted more of that hockey. That was an absolutely fantastic, fun Stanley Cup final for me to watch as a fan. Number 6, Pittsburgh, Minnesota in 1991. Now, of course, that's the series that produced the famous Mario Lemieux goal with the "oh baby" call at the end from Bob Cole and all that. But Minnesota wasn't supposed to be there. Minnesota was supposed to be out in the first round. They really shouldn't have been in the playoffs at all. They had a horrible record that year. And not only did they get to the final, but they took a couple of games against Pittsburgh. And so, yeah, it was definitely a series that felt like it was up for grabs at points. Although in the end, Pittsburgh wins their first Stanley Cup, so that made it fun as well. Seventh on the board. I mean, Dallas and Buffalo was a fun one for me. 7th on the board, I'm going to go with... it's not going to go with Boston, Vancouver. That's not going to happen. I'm going to go with 1990, the Oilers against Boston. It was a 4-1 series that year. That was as close as Boston could come to knocking off Edmonton in the Stanley Cup Final. It just wasn't meant to happen. For me as a Bruins fan at that point, though, I was still early in my fandom, and it was a fun one to watch. Really enjoyed that series quite a bit. Even though Edmonton did win it, there was the frustrating Peter Klima goal, of course, but it's hockey. These things happen. It was obviously fun for Oiler fans. They'll tell you how fun it was. And yeah, that was a great one. Number 8, I'm going with the 1996 Colorado Avalanche and Florida series. Now that one's a sweep, but Game 4 to me that showed the series was closer than your standard sweep. Of course, that one went to overtime. There was the rats on the ice every time Florida scored, and that made it fun. Florida wasn't supposed to be there. Definitely the underdog runs, I think, make for a more fun Stanley Cup Final. I look at Montreal against Tampa Bay as another example of that. Montreal wasn't supposed to be there, and so it creates more intrigue and more interest from the fans, I think. Number 9 on the board, I'm going to go with Carolina and the Oilers back in 2006. Really, really fun series. Again, that was a series where I knew I was supposed to be cheering for Edmonton because Canadian team and Canada needs a Stanley Cup, but I was cheering for Carolina in that final. It happened that way. I wanted to see the Canes win it, and they did. This, of course, was following years of hearing how, well, hockey's not going to work out in Carolina, shouldn't have moved the Whalers, and there's still that argument for not moving the Whalers, but Carolina's had a pretty good time of it, and they've become a pretty good market for hockey. Number 10, I'm going to go with Washington over Vegas in 2018. That Vegas team, what a remarkable first year. And then it coincided with this channel growing quite a bit as well, so that may play a bit of a role in that. But yeah, I would put that series as number 10. And by the time we got to the final, everybody was picking Vegas. Everybody's like, well, yeah, Vegas is going to win this. Vegas is clearly, the favored child of the NHL, and they get all the favored calls and everything. And then they lost in 5. Washington got that cross-crease pass going, and that was pretty much all she wrote. Once Washington came in with a game plan that other teams either didn't figure out or weren't able to execute, yeah, Washington had it, and they got their first Stanley Cup. Number 11... 11. I'm going to go with 1993, Montreal against LA. That was a really fun playoffs anyways. That, of course, is the last Stanley Cup appearance in the final for Wayne Gretzky, the only one he took the Kings to, but really, really good series. It was a 5-game series, but it's just Patrick Roy. Patrick Roy was remarkable that year. That was the year that told me he was the best goalie I'd ever watched, and I've never had my opinion changed on that matter. 96, of course, he's in Colorado. 2001, he's in Colorado as well. And so, yeah, that was a fun final. That was obviously pre the dead puck era. Dead puck era definitely, I think, has influenced my opinion on some of these, but at any rate, pretty fun final between Montreal and LA. For 12th, I'm going to go with 2013 Chicago against Boston. That was a closer series, I thought, than a 4-2 series. I was kind of choked that one didn't go the full 7. I thought Boston was a good foil for Chicago. And so Chicago wins the series. They were the better team overall, but man, Boston really gave it a run. And of course, as a Bruins fan, I was excited at the idea of Boston winning 2 out of 3, because then that would have meant they could have gone for 3 out of 4 in 2014. Obviously, that didn't happen. They have the one Stanley Cup in 2011. But yeah, I would put that Chicago-Boston series at number 12. Number 13. Yeah, I'll go with Dallas and Buffalo. So that's a 6-game series. And yes, this series would be ranked much higher if not for how the series ended, with the really controversial goal by Brett Hull where his skates in the crease. A play that now is a legal goal. The year after that, completely legal goal. It's a little bit fuzzy when you get into asking, should that have been a legal goal? The NHL says yes. The Dallas Stars say, hey, they let us know that rule, they were changing how they were enforcing it. The Sabres say, we never got that memo. So to this day, that's the storyline from that one. But yeah, Dallas, really, really solid Stanley Cup final. It's too bad that one's overshadowed by that too, because it was a fun series between Buffalo and Dallas. This being one of only 2 times Buffalo's made the final, and the only time that I've seen Buffalo in the final. Number 14 from 1982, the Islanders and the Canucks. Now this was a sweep, and to me, once the Islanders won Game 1, I realized, this is not going the Canucks' way. And the games were close for the most part, but the Islanders were just the better team. They had the scoring, they had the toughness, they had the goaltending, they had the defense. There was no weakness with the Islanders for that 4 Stanley Cup stretch there. They were an absolute wagon, and I'm still old enough to remember when the Islanders were that good. And I understand that it's been a while since that took place, but yep, this guy still remembers and just how good they were. 15, I'm going to go with the 1987 series between Philadelphia and the Oilers. Games went all the way to 7. Now, what's interesting is in 84, I cheered for the Oilers. 85, Oilers. 86, I was cheering for Calgary because they'd never won a cup before. 87, though, I was rooting for the Flyers as well. So what changed was that in 87, I mean, Hextall had an absolutely amazing run, ends up winning the Conn Smythe Trophy, and so yeah, that's 2 Oiler Stanley Cups that are in the top 50, or 3 Oiler Cups that are in the top 15 for me. So definitely a bias in favor of the older series. Number 16, I'm going to go with St. Louis over Boston. The Boston Bruins and St. Louis Blues had a great series. It was a lot of fun. The right team won in the end. It was a tough watch for me as a Bruins fan because the series was right there and Boston could not take it, which St. Louis didn't let them take it. And they won their first and to date only Stanley Cup. So kudos to the Blues for that. At 17th, I'll put Boston and Vancouver in 17th. It is a series that as time goes by, and especially with the recent, it's still going on, right? Still the public discussions back and forth about who said what and who did what, and it just gets exhausting. It was a 7-game series where for the Canucks to win, Luongo had to get a shutout. When Luongo didn't get a shutout, it was all his fault. They lost. It was the weirdest thing. And again, I remember going into Game 7, the conversation being, well, if the Canucks win Game 7, Luongo's going to be Conn Smythe, right? And there was no argument for anybody else in Vancouver to be the Conn Smythe winner. There was none. So it is an odd series still to look back on, and just the amount of animosity that there was in that series really lessened the fun for me watching it. It made it so it wasn't a lot of fun. When the series gets that ugly and you like both teams, it makes it tough to watch. I understand for everybody else, that was great. They wanted to see them tear each other apart, and they got what they wanted. Number 18, I'm going to go with 2001 between Colorado and New Jersey. That was a fun series that went 7 games. Now, by fun, I mean that New Jersey, by the time we get to 2001, there's more offense there. There's more scoring. It was more wide open. It wasn't quite as trappy as the 1995 final was, which was unwatchable at points. 2001 was better, and Colorado and New Jersey were very evenly matched. That was a really, really good series. 19th, I'm going to go with 2009. So Detroit and Pittsburgh, the rematch in 2009, I actually enjoyed more than the first one, although the first one was very good as well. So 7-game series win for Pittsburgh, Sidney Crosby's first Stanley Cup, and absolutely tremendous Stanley Cup final that did go the full 7 games. Of course, for Detroit, that is their last appearance in a Stanley Cup final, which now is 13 years ago. It does not feel like it's been 13 years since Detroit was in the Stanley Cup final, and yet here we are. So I will stop at 20, and for 20, I'm going to go with our most recent Stanley Cup. Colorado Avalanche against Tampa Bay Lightning. So what's interesting is Colorado's won the Stanley Cup 3 times. All 3 of their Stanley Cups for me end up in the top 20 out of the 41 Stanley Cups that I've watched. This Stanley Cup final this past year goes 6 games. I thought it was great. Tampa Bay and Colorado were both very good. They both belonged there, and it was excellent. So looking over these Stanley Cups that don't make the top 20, Minnesota and the Islanders, really it is. I mean, I'm so young at that point. It's my first Stanley Cup. I don't remember as much of it as I do of others. 83, the Islanders beat the Oilers. There wasn't any tension to that. It was the Oilers weren't ready. '85, the Oilers beat Philly. Well, it's back-to-backs and 5-game series. It was pretty early in that series. You could tell it was going to be over. '86, Montreal knocking off Calgary in 5. Much the same, that it was pretty obvious pretty early that Montreal was winning that. '88, the 4-0 sweep of the Oilers against Boston. I mean, it was fun for me in that it was the first year that I'd been cheering for the Bruins, '87, '88. But it was kind of, there wasn't really any tension. I felt 1990, the Bruins were much closer, not just because they won a game, but I thought it was a better series. 1992, Pittsburgh and Chicago, where two teams that had nice long winning streaks met each other, and Pittsburgh's winning streak continued right through that Stanley Cup final. And again, once they won that first game, I went, all right, so Pittsburgh wins, back-to-back cups for them, good for them. 95, as I said, New Jersey and Detroit, that series was borderline unwatchable. Keep in mind, I don't cheer for Detroit or New Jersey, so I was watching just as a neutral party, which definitely makes a difference. You will be a lot more emotionally invested if you're a fan of either team. 97, Detroit and Philly. That one was an interesting series in that Lindros gets to the final and gets taken out in 4 straight. Detroit did to Philly what New Jersey had done to them 2 years earlier, and it showed. They had learned a lot through their setbacks, both against New Jersey and against Colorado the year after. 98, a 4-game sweep of Detroit over Washington. I was very excited as a Caps fan at the time, and it just wasn't a great series. 2000, New Jersey and Dallas, 6-game series. New Jersey wins it. Fun series here and there, sure, but I don't have it in the top 20. If I went to top 30, it would have made it. Detroit and Carolina, that was a fun little series, but again, early on, you could tell Detroit was just a much better team than Carolina. Artur Serbe helps get Carolina to the finals. New Jersey and Anaheim, this was a series where the home team won every game. It was some tough hockey to watch. Anaheim and New Jersey both played the trap. So, yeah, there was some games that almost put me to sleep in that one. Which is weird because the '03 New Jersey Devils I thought were a more talented team than the '95 one, and it showed in how they played. But that final, man, that was a tough one at points. And I think a lot of it was Anaheim dragging them into that. 2007, Anaheim over Ottawa in 5. I never felt there was any discussion over who was going to win that. I had no doubt Anaheim was winning the Stanley Cup. That was the year I called Anaheim for the Cup before the playoffs even started. 2008, Detroit over Pittsburgh. Fun series. A little bit less fun, I thought, than 2009. 2010, Chicago beating Philly. I didn't care. I could not have possibly cared less. 2010, I was so mad at hockey that year. It was such a tough year in that Vancouver and Boston both done in the playoffs, and just I didn't like either Chicago or Philadelphia, so yeah, that would, if we were going all the way to 41, that's 41 right there. LA and New Jersey, that was a fun one. And that was one where it looked like New Jersey was considering a comeback, and you never really counted them out because, with Brodeur and with the fact that New Jersey was trying for that one last hurrah. But in the end, LA wins that one, and then they win in 2014 again against the Rangers. That was a good series too. I know for Ranger fans, they may be less a fan of that one than they are of 94. But 2014, there was some fun in that, but it's a 5-game series. And again, I never really got any feeling that LA was in any sort of danger in that series. 2016, Pittsburgh over San Jose. 6-game series there. Pittsburgh had that one from game 1. 2017, there was a lot of controversy in that final, but really the best team did win, and I don't know how close. I mean, it was a 6-game series, but it was Pittsburgh's series to lose, and they didn't lose it. 2019, I talked about. 2020, Tampa Bay over Dallas. As a Dallas fan, it was fun, but once you get there, you knew Dallas was overwhelmed. They weren't going to be able to answer Tampa Bay. And they got my hopes up just a little bit at one point in the series, but they did lose it in 6. Montreal losing in 2021 against Tampa. Another fun series, sure. For Canadian fans, of course, team being in the final. For me, with the channel, the only time a Canadian team's been in the final that the channel's been around. So that was fun for me on that level. And that might be part of the reason why views on the channel dropped from one year to the next, is Montreal being in the final. Because when Canadian teams do better, the channel generally does better. But yeah, once that series got started, you knew Tampa Bay was the better team. And the best thing about that really for Montreal was they did not get swept. Since then, of course, Montreal's been below the playoff line. Price hasn't played again. other than those few games last year, and now we're still in a position where he may not play again. Shea Weber's career essentially ended with that Stanley Cup final. All right, there you go. Stanley Cups since 1981 and my favorite 20. So let me know your favorite Stanley Cup final in the comment section below. Why it's the 94 series between the Rangers and the Canucks. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.